The Tiger tank's 80-mm gun roared, and Sergeant Bill Morrison watched the shell punch clean through the Sherman 2 positions ahead of him. The third tank in their column erupted in flames, the third one that morning. Morrison had heard the grim joke repeated so often it had become gospel. The Sherman is a Ronson lighter, lights first time, every time. According to everything he'd been told, his M4 Sherman was a death trap facing the technologically superior German Panthers. What he didn't know yet was that German tank crews were telling a very different story. The M4 Sherman entered service in 1942 with specifications that seemed woefully inadequate by late war standards. Its 75mm main gun, later upgraded to a 76mm, couldn't reliably penetrate the frontal armor of German Tigers or Panthers from standard combat ranges. Its maximum armor thickness of 76mm seemed laughable compared to the Tiger I's 100mm frontal plate or the Panther's sloped 80mm glacis. The Sherman weighed 33 tons, nearly 20 tons lighter than a Tiger. To American crews facing these steel monsters in the hedgerows of Normandy and the forests of the Ardennes, it felt like bringing a knife to a gunfight. But here's what nobody told Morrison. German Panzer commanders were more terrified of encountering 5 Shermans than one Tiger was of facing 5 Tigers. The revelation wasn't about firepower. It was about mathematics, reliability, and a design philosophy that seemed mundane but proved revolutionary. While Germany produced approximately 6,000 Tigers and Panthers combined throughout the entire war, the United States manufactured over 49,000 Shermans. But the numbers alone don't explain why German tank ace Otto Carius wrote in his memoir that the Americans could afford to lose 5 tanks for every one of ours and still come out ahead, and they did. The Sherman's seemingly inferior specifications masked a brilliant engineering compromise. Its cast hull construction meant that a single Ford River Rouge plant could produce 150 complete tanks per month by 1943. The Sherman used a gasoline radial engine, originally designed for aircraft, the Continental, R975 or the Ford GAA V8. While this made it more flammable than diesel-powered vehicles, it also meant that thousands of mechanics already knew how to maintain it. The Wright R975 shared parts with engines used in training aircraft across every airfield in America. At the Battle of Ardennes, in September 1944, this philosophy proved its worth in the most unexpected way. The German 5th Panzer Army, equipped with 262 tanks including 60 new Panther AOSFSGs, faced the U.S. 4th Armored Division with approximately 200 Shermans. On paper, it should have been a massacre. The Panther's 75mm QK-42 L-70 gun could penetrate a Sherman's armor from 2,000 yards. The Sherman needed to be within 500 yards to harm a Panther frontally. Yet the Americans won decisively, losing 55 tanks while destroying or capturing 281 German vehicles, including 86 Panthers. The secret? The Shermans could actually fight. German after-action reports revealed that of the Panthers that reached Ardennes, only about 40% were combat-capable at any given time. Final drives broke. Transmissions failed. Engines overheated. The Panther's Maybach HL-230 engine required replacement after roughly 1,000 miles. The Sherman's power plant was good for 6,000. When a Sherman's transmission failed, crew could replace it in a field within hours using a spare carried by support vehicles. When a Panther's final drive broke, a common problem with its ambitious interleaved road wheel design, it required factory-level facilities. German tanker Johannes Fischer recalled the moment he understood what his commanders had been facing. "We saw the American tanks burning, Ja, and we cheered. But then more came. Always more. We would disable 3, 4, 5 of them, and 6 more would appear. Our Panther had been in action for 2 weeks, and already our mechanics said it needed to return to depot. Their tanks, they kept fighting. The Sherman's 5-man crew layout versus the Panther's 5-man crew or Tiger's 5-man crew seems irrelevant until you examine combat efficiency. The Sherman's crew could sustain operations for 24 hours with proper rotation, because the bow gunner could spell other positions. Its turret traverse was powered. It could spin 360 degrees in 15 seconds. A Tiger's manual traverse took nearly a full minute to complete the same rotation. In the close-range ambush warfare of French hedgerows or German forests, that difference meant American crews could engage targets on their flanks 5 times faster. Perhaps most surprisingly, the Sherman's inadequate armor was positioned at angles that made it more effective than it appeared. The M4A3E8 variant's frontal differential cover created a shot trap that could deflect even 80D 8mm rounds at certain angles. The British discovered that Shermans lost to enemy fire could often be recovered and repaired. 70% of disabled Shermans returned to service. For Tigers and Panthers, that figure was under 30%. By war's end, the Sherman's design philosophy, reliability, maintainability, and numerical superiority over individual technical prowess had reshaped American military doctrine. The concept influenced everything from the M60 Patton tank to the Bradley fighting vehicle. Build equipment that works consistently, can be maintained by ordinary soldiers, and can be produced in overwhelming numbers. The Germans built 347 Tigers over 3 years. In that same period, American factories produced more Shermans in 6 weeks. Sergeant Morrison survived the war. In 1948, interviewed for an Army history project, he said, "We used to curse the Sherman, called it a death trap. Then I met some German prisoners, Panzer crews. One told me he'd take a Tiger in a one-on-one fight any day, but he never got a one-on-one fight. He got 5 Shermans working together, and his Tiger broke down before he could engage them all." He paused, then added, "Turns out the best tank wasn't the one with the biggest gun. It was the one that showed up." Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov watched in disbelief as American GIs at the Elbe River meeting point in April 1945 politely declined his offer to trade weapons. He was holding a PPSH-41 submachine gun, the Papa-Shah that had driven German infantry into panicked retreat from Stalingrad to Berlin. It fired 900 rounds per minute from a 71-round drum magazine. The Americans were clutching their M1 Garand rifles, clumsy 8-round weapons that made an audible ping when empty, literally announcing to the enemy that you needed to reload. To Volkov, it seemed like watching someone choose a horse-drawn cart over a truck. What the Soviet lieutenant didn't understand was that American infantry doctrine had discovered something counterintuitive. In actual combat conditions, the inferior semi-automatic rifle was killing enemy soldiers at nearly 3 times the rate of the seemingly superior submachine gun. The contrast between the weapons seemed stark on paper. The PPSH-41, developed in 1941 by Georgy Shpagin, was a masterpiece of simple, brutal efficiency. It used just 87 parts, many of them stamped metal that could be produced by unskilled labor. Soviet factories churned out 6 million of them during the war, 1 for every 6 Soviet soldiers. Its 7.62 K25mm Tokarev cartridge turned the weapon into a room-clearing storm of lead. German soldiers called it the Russian typewriter for its distinctive sound, and learned to fear the sight of Soviet infantry advancing with drums of ammunition ready. The M1 Garand, by comparison, seemed hopelessly outdated. A semi-automatic rifle when the future clearly belonged to full automatic weapons. It weighed 9.5 pounds empty versus the PPSH's 8 pounds. It fired only as fast as you could pull the trigger. Its 8-round end-block clip had to be fully emptied before reloading, and that clip ejected with a distinctive metallic ping that every soldier worried would draw enemy fire. It cost approximately $85 to manufacture, versus roughly $10 for a PPSH-41. When Soviet troops captured Garands from isolated American units during chaotic engagements, they examined them with puzzlement. Why would the wealthy Americans produce something so expensive and limited? The answer emerged in the combat data that both nations were quietly analyzing. At the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, U.S. Army operational research teams conducted something unprecedented. They actually measured effective hit rates under combat conditions. They discovered that American riflemen, armed with M1 Garands, were achieving effective hits, shots that caused casualties or suppression, at 3.2 times the rate of soldiers using submachine guns at ranges beyond 100 yards. More surprisingly, even at ranges between 50-100 yards, where submachine guns should have dominated, the Garand still achieved 1.8 times the effective hit rate. The Battle of Tarawa in November 1943 provided the brutal laboratory that proved the Garand's unexpected superiority. Marines assaulting fortified Japanese positions on Bastogne Island needed to suppress enemy pillboxes at ranges between 100-300 yards while crossing open ground. The Japanese Type 100 submachine gun, similar in concept to the PPSH-41, proved nearly useless at these ranges. Its 8-meter Nambu rounds lost effectiveness beyond 75 yards and accuracy was abysmal. Marines with M1 Garands could deliver accurate sustained fire at 300 yards while advancing. More critically, they could do this while moving. The secret was the .30-06 Springfield cartridge the Garand fired. This full-power rifle round retained lethal energy out to 800 yards and could penetrate light cover, wooden walls, sandbags, even some corrugated metal, that stopped pistol-caliber submachine gun rounds cold. At the Battle of Hurtgen Forest, American troops discovered they could engage German soldiers behind trees and logs at ranges where PPSH-armed Soviet units would have needed to close to suicidal distances. Soviet military theorist Colonel Mikhail Kalashnikov, yes, that Kalashnikov, wrote in a classified 1946 report that American combat doctrine had revealed a critical flaw in Soviet thinking. Red Army tactics assumed combat occurred at ranges under 200 meters, where overwhelming automatic fire could suppress and destroy the enemy. This worked against German Wehrmacht units in the close terrain of cities and forests. But American after-action reports showed that 70% of infantry engagements in Western Europe occurred at ranges between 2,400 meters, precisely where the Garand excelled, and the PPSH became a liability. The ping, that Soviet soldiers mocked as a fatal flaw, American combat testing showed it was largely irrelevant. In the chaos of battle, enemy soldiers almost never heard the distinctive clip ejection sound over gunfire, explosions, and their own weapons. More importantly, Garand shooters learned to keep a spare clip in hand. The weapon could be reloaded in under 3 seconds by a trained rifleman. The PPSH's 71-round drum, while impressive, took nearly 20 seconds to change and weighed 4 pounds when loaded. Soviet infantry typically carried only 2 drums, 142 rounds total. American riflemen carried 80 rounds in clips as standard, with many carrying 121 and 60 rounds, and those rounds hit targets at ranges where Soviet submachine gunners couldn't even engage. General George S. Patton called the Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised, but the real Vindication came from an unexpected source. German army reports from the Eastern and Western fronts, captured after the war, revealed telling statistics. German casualties attributed to rifle fire were 2.7 times higher per American division than per Soviet rifle division, despite Soviet units typically having equal or greater infantry strength. Wehrmacht tactical manuals from 1944 warned soldiers that American riflemen could deliver accurate fire at unexpected ranges and advised maintaining distances of 100+ meters when possible, exactly the range where PPSH-armed Soviet infantry became ineffective. The most damning evidence came from the Battle of Aachen in October 1944. American infantry clearing urban fortifications, precisely the environment where submachine guns should dominate, still preferred their Garands. Combat interviews revealed why. Inside buildings, the Garand's semi-automatic fire allowed soldiers to place precise shots at Germans firing from rooms, stairwells, and windows without wasting ammunition. The sustained rate of fire from a trained Garand operator, 40-50 aimed shots per minute, proved more lethal than 900 round per minute. Spray and pray tactics in rooms where over-penetration and ricochets endangered friendly troops. Soviet doctrine evolved after the war. The SKS carbine, adopted in 1945, and later the AK-47, both fired intermediate cartridges, a compromise between the PPSH's pistol round and the Garand's full-power rifle cartridge. Kalashnikov himself acknowledged that studying captured Garand's and American combat reports influenced his thinking about effective range and cartridge power. When Lieutenant Volkov finally got his hands on a Garand during a friendly exchange demonstration, he fired it at targets 250 meters away, roughly the length of 2.5 football fields. Every shot hit within a hand span of his aiming point. He tried the same with his beloved PPSH-41. At that range, he couldn't reliably hit a man-sized target even with a full drum of ammunition. In his diary that night, Volkov wrote something that never appeared in official Soviet reports. The Americans do not need to fire 900 bullets per minute. They only need to fire 8 bullets that hit what they aim at. Perhaps this is why they won so decisively in France, while we bled for every mile in Poland. Their rifle is not useless, our understanding was. The M1 Garand served as the U.S. standard infantry rifle until 1957, participating in Korea with the same devastating effectiveness. The PPSH-41 was phased out by 1951. The lesson proved enduring. In infantry combat, accuracy at range trumps volume of fire at close quarters. Sometimes the weapon that seems less impressive on paper writes the history books in blood.